Ethan walked through the massive gates of the alien city, his mind racing. He had been sent by the Earth government to negotiate a peace treaty between two powerful alien factions, but nothing had gone as planned. The moment he had arrived, the atmosphere had been tense, and now he was standing in front of the throne room of Queen Seraphina, the ruler of the powerful Kaitar Empire. The Kaitar Empire had been at war for decades with the Zergons, another alien species, and the fighting had caused chaos across many star systems. Ethan's mission was clear: stop the bloodshed and find a way for both sides to lay down their weapons.
Ow.
But what he hadn't expected was to be summoned to meet Queen Seraphina herself. The throne room was grand and imposing,
With high ceilings.
and walls adorned with gold and silver. Ethan couldn't help but feel small and insignificant in the presence of the queen. She was known for her beauty and her fierce leadership. Her reputation had spread across the galaxy, and now he was about to face her. When he entered, the doors slammed shut behind him. The guards stood at attention, their eyes fixed on him as he approached the throne. There, sitting in a golden chair, was Queen Seraphina. Her dark blue skin shimmered in the dim light, and her eyes glowing with an intense purple hue locked onto him the moment he stepped into the room. She had long, flowing hair that seemed to move as if it were alive, and her regal attire only added to the air of authority she commanded. Ethan had been briefed about her, but seeing her in person was something entirely different. She exuded power and grace, and he could sense the weight of her kingdom on her shoulders. She was more than just a queen. She was a symbol of her people's strength. "Human," she said, her voice cold yet commanding. "You come to offer peace, yet I see you are nothing more than a messenger. Tell me, what can a simple diplomat offer in the face of war?" Ethan stood tall, trying to hide his nervousness. He had dealt with countless politicians, but this was different. This was the ruler of an entire empire, someone whose words could determine the fate of thousands. "I offer more than just words," Ethan said, his voice steady. "I come with a proposal. Peace treaty that will unite our people, end the fighting, and ensure prosperity for all." The queen's eyes narrowed as she studied him. She didn't speak for a long time, and the silence felt like it lasted an eternity. Ethan began to wonder if his efforts were in vain, if he had underestimated just how deep the conflict ran. Finally, Seraphina stood from her throne, and the guards quickly moved aside to make way for her. She walked toward him with the grace of a predator and the confidence of someone who had never known defeat. "You speak of peace, human. But what do you truly understand about it?" she asked. Her voice was soft now, almost as if she were testing him. "I understand that the cost of war is too high. Lives are lost, and no one wins in the end. I want to help end that cycle," Ethan replied, though he wasn't sure she would believe him. Seraphina stopped just a few feet in front of him, her piercing gaze never leaving his face. "I have seen many like you before," she said, her tone almost mocking. "Diplomats who come with their promises of peace. They speak of unity and cooperation, but when it comes time to make hard decisions, they fail." Ethan's heart pounded in his chest, but he refused to back down. "I'm not like the others," he said firmly. "I've seen the consequences of this war, and I want to change that." For a moment, Seraphina said nothing. She simply stared at him, as if weighing his words carefully. Then, without warning, she moved swiftly, pinning Ethan against the wall with surprising strength. Her hands gripped his shoulders, holding him in place. And for the first time in his life, Ethan felt truly powerless. He looked into her eyes, his breath catching in his throat. There was no mistaking the fire in her gaze, the fierce, unstoppable force that had made her the ruler of the Kadar Empire. "You want peace, human?" she asked, her voice a low whisper, as though daring him to answer. "Then marry me." Ethan's eyes widened in shock. Marry her? He had come to negotiate peace, not to become a part of her royal family. His mind raced, trying to process what she had just said. I don't understand," Ethan stammered, still trapped in her grip. Seraphine's expression softened, but her eyes remained sharp. "The Qatar Empire does not accept weakness. and neither does the Zergon Empire. To unite these factions, we need more than just words. We need a Bondan alliance that will hold them together. And that bond, human, must be forged in marriage. Ethan's heart raced. This was not what he had signed up for. He had expected diplomacy, not this strange and sudden offer. But the longer he stood there, pinned against the wall by her strength, the more he realized that Serafina was serious. This wasn't a game. This was a decision that would change everything. "What would you have me do?" Ethan asked, his voice quiet now, almost resigned. "You will marry me," Serafina said, her voice firm. "And together, we will bring peace to the galaxy." Ethan was still in shock. He could feel the Queen's powerful hands on his shoulders, holding him firmly against the wall. The words she had just spoken echoed in his mind, "Marry me." He had never expected this. The peaceful negotiations had come to initiate had quickly turned into a personal ultimatum. Marry her, the ruler of the Qatar Empire? Seraphine's eyes held his, as though waiting for him to make a decision. Her grip on his shoulders loosened slightly, but her gaze remained unwavering. Ethan felt a strange tension in the air. One, that wasn't just about politics or war anymore. It was about something deeper, something he wasn't sure he was ready for. I don't understand," Ethan said, trying to collect his thoughts. "You want me to marry you so that your empire can have peace? How can that work?" The Queen tilted her head, her glowing purple eyes never leaving him. She stepped back slightly but kept her gaze intense. "Peace is not something that can be achieved through treaties alone, human. Words can be broken, promises can be forgotten. But a bond between two powerful factions, this cannot be undone. To unite the Qatar and the Zergon people, we need more than just diplomacy. We need strength. We need a union that both sides will respect." Ethan's mind raced. He had read about political marriages and history alliances forged through the joining of royal families, peace secured by the power of love or control, but this wasn't like anything he had imagined. The Queen wasn't asking for a simple agreement. She wanted him, personally, to marry her. Was this truly about peace? Or was there something more she wasn't telling him? "Why me?" he asked, his voice unsure. "Why not another diplomat or leader from Earth?" Seraphine's lips curled into a faint smile, but it was not a gentle smile, "because you are different, human. I can see it in your eyes. You are not like the others. You are not here for power or glory. You are here to do what is right." Ethan felt a pang of confusion. He had always believed that his role as a diplomat was to find solutions, to bring peace where there was conflict. But this was a decision he wasn't prepared for. A personal marriage to an alien queen? It didn't seem possible. And yet, as he looked into Seraphine's eyes, something told him she wasn't joking. She wasn't playing games. This was serious. "You're asking me to change my life," Ethan said, trying to keep his voice steady. "This isn't something I can just agree to. I don't know anything about your people, your customs, or even what this marriage would mean for me." For us, the Queen didn't move, but her presence seemed to fill the entire room. She took a step closer, her gaze never leaving his face. "No, this is a difficult decision. It's not just about politics, Ethan. It's about survival. My people are on the brink of destruction, and the Zergons are our greatest threat. We have fought for too long. If we do not end this war soon, we will all perish. The only way to stop it is through unity, and that unity begins with me. And you." Ethan was silent for a long moment. He wasn't sure if he was more afraid of the war that could break out, or the idea of marrying this powerful queen. He had no connection to her, no love for her. Yet he could feel the weight of her words, the urgency in her voice. The war had taken a heavy toll on both the Qatar and Zergon people. Countless lives had been lost. Now Serafina was offering him a chance to end it all. "But at a great personal cost. I didn't come here to become a part of your royal family," Ethan finally said, his voice quieter now. "I came here to negotiate peace. But you're right, this is the only way to save your people and the galaxy, then maybe I have no choice." The Queen's expression softened for a moment, and she stepped back, giving him space. I know this is not what you expected, human, but peace comes at a price. Sometimes that price is a life, or a name, or a family. For me, it is the future of my empire. For you, it might be something else. But I will not force you into this. The choice is yours. Ethan took a deep breath, his mind spinning. He had come here thinking he would help stop a war, but now it felt like he was standing on the edge of a much larger decision. If he married Seraphina, it would change everything. He would be bound to her, not just politically, but personally. He would become part of her empire, her people. He would be responsible for maintaining peace between their worlds. I need time, he said, feeling the weight of the moment. I need to think about this. Seraphina nodded, her eyes softening. Take all the time you need, but understand. This human, the Zerjons, will not wait forever. The war is only getting worse. If you choose to walk away, we may never have another chance to bring peace. Ethan nodded silently. He had known the consequences of failure, but now he was faced with a choice that felt impossible. He had come here to help, to be a diplomat, to find a peaceful resolution. But peace, it seemed, was more complicated than he could have ever imagined. As he left the Queen's throne room, his mind was filled with questions. Could he really marry Seraphina? Could he live with the weight of such a decision? He had never imagined his life would come to this. And yet, as he walked down the long corridors, he couldn't shake the feeling that this was just the beginning of something much bigger than he had ever planned. The fate of the galaxy rested on his next choice, and he had no idea if he was ready to make it. Ethan spent the next few days alone in his quarters, wrestling with the Queen's proposal. The offer had taken him completely by surprise. Marrying Seraphina was not something he had ever considered. He had come to this planet as a diplomat, not as a potential husband. Yet as much as he tried to push the thought from his mind, it remained, haunting him. He had seen the devastation of war firsthand. Countless lives had been lost in the years of conflict between the Qatar and the Zergons. His mission had been clear: stop the bloodshed. But now, the solution had become so much more complicated. Could he really marry someone he had just met? For the sake of peace? Ethan walked along the corridors of the palace, his steps slow and thoughtful. The walls were lined with paintings and statues of Qatar warriors, all symbols of strength and power. But Ethan couldn't help but think of the lives that had been destroyed because of the constant fighting. And now, the weight of Seraphine's offer was upon him. He had been sent to negotiate peace, to find a way to stop the war. But in a strange twist of fate, it seemed that the only way to do that was by becoming part of the very thing he was trying to stop the war. If he married Seraphina, he would not just be negotiating peace, but becoming a symbol of unity. But was he willing to pay such a personal price? After hours of pacing and thinking, Ethan knew he needed to see Seraphina again. This decision alone. She had given him time to think, but the longer he thought, the more uncertain he became. It was time to face the Queen again, to hear her side and understand what was truly at stake. The palace was quiet as he entered the throne room. The massive doors creaked as they opened, revealing the Queen standing at the far end. She was dressed in her royal attire, her posture straight and commanding, yet there was a hint of concern in her eyes. Ethan took a deep breath before stepping forward. "Queen Seraphina," he said, his voice steady but unsure. "I've thought about what you asked of me. I'm here to understand more. I need to know why this marriage is so important, and why it has to be me." Seraphina turned to face him, her expression softening. She seemed to have been waiting for this moment. "I knew you would come," she said. "You have a strong will, Ethan. It's one of the reasons I wanted you here. But peace requires more than will. It requires sacrifice." Ethan stood before her, looking into her glowing purple eyes. "I understand that peace is not easy, but why me? There are other ways to end this war. You don't need to marry me. For that, you're powerful on your own." Seraphina walked toward him, her steps measured. "You see, that is where you are wrong. I am powerful, yes, but power alone cannot unite us. The Zerjons will never trust me, not without a symbol of true unity. A marriage between us, would show both our people that we are committed to ending the war, not just through words, but through action. Ethan's heart pounded as he listened. He had seen the tension between the Qatar and the Zergons, the mistrust. That ran deep between the two species. A treaty would be fragile at best, easily broken. But a marriage? That was something that couldn't be undone. But I don't understand, Ethan said, shaking his head. You say peace requires sacrifice, but what about me? What happens to my life if I agree? I'm just a diplomat, not a king. I don't have the power to rule your people. Serafina paused, her expression thoughtful. I'm not asking you to rule, Ethan. I'm asking you to stand with me, to show the galaxy that humans and Qatar can come together. This war is not just about us. It affects everyone. The entire galaxy is watching, waiting for someone to end the bloodshed. If we do not act now, we risk everything. Ethan closed his eyes for a moment, taking in her words. He had always believed that peace could be achieved through diplomacy, through negotiation. But now, the truth was clear. Sometimes peace didn't come through words. Sometimes it came through something much harder: sacrifice. Okay, he said, his voice quiet. I'll do it. I'll marry you. But on one condition. Serafina raised an eyebrow, clearly intrigued. And what is that condition? Ethan took a deep breath, trying to steady his nerves. If I do this, I need your promise that you will not only fight for peace, but you will protect it. This marriage cannot just be a political move. It must be real. I will not be part of a lie. Serafina studied him for a long moment, her eyes searching his face. Finally, she nodded. You have my word. This will be real. Together, we will lead the Qatar and Zergons to peace. No more fighting. No more bloodshed. Ethan's heart sank, but he knew this was the only way forward. There was no going back now. He had made his choice, and while it scared him, he knew it was the right one. The fate of the galaxy was in his hands, and this was the only way to ensure that peace would finally be achieved. I'll marry you, Ethan said, his voice resolute. But I need to understand what this means for us. For our people, I need to know that we are not just playing a dangerous game. Serafina stepped closer, her presence overwhelming. It means that together we will be stronger than ever. Before, our bond will unite our people, and with it, we will show the galaxy that even the most divided can come together. And as for you, Ethan, this marriage will change you. It will change everything. Ethan nodded slowly. He had no idea what the future would hold, but one thing was clear: peace would come at a cost, and he was ready to pay it. The days following Ethan's decision passed in a blur. He had agreed to marry Queen Serafina, but what had seemed like a simple choice now felt more complicated than ever. He had come here to negotiate peace, not to become part of an alien royal family. But as the days wore on, he began to realize that his decision was much bigger than just him. It was about the future of two entire civilizations. Ethan sat in his quarters, trying to process the enormity of the promise he had made. His mind raced with questions he didn't yet have answers to. What would the marriage mean for his life? Would he truly be able to help end the war? And more importantly, could he trust Serafina to uphold her end of the bargain? The Qatar Empire was a world of power and tradition. The Zergons, on the other hand, were ruthless and cunning, always seeking an advantage in every situation. Their war had torn apart entire star systems, and now it was up to Ethan and Serafina to bring an end to it. The weight of that responsibility sat heavily on his shoulders as he stood up from the chair and walked toward the window. He looked out at the vast, unfamiliar landscape of the Qatar homeworld. It was beautiful, but there was an underlying darkness, a reminder that war was never far away. Ethan had seen too much destruction in his own lifetime to ever take peace for granted. He had been sent here to stop the war, but now he was becoming a part of it in a way he had never expected. And it wasn't just about the war, it was about Serafina, the woman he had agreed to marry. In just a few short days, he would be bound to her, not just by duty, but by choice. Could he really go through with it? Ethan's thoughts were interrupted by a knock on the door. He turned to see one of Seraphine's servants standing in the doorway. "The queen requests your presence, human," the servant said, bowing slightly. Ethan nodded, his stomach twisting with nerves. It was time. He followed the servant through the palace corridors, his footsteps echoing in the quiet halls. The closer they got to the queen's chambers, the more his heart raced. What would the ceremony be like? What would his life look like once the marriage was official? When they reached the grand doors of Seraphine's chambers, the servant bowed again and opened the door. Inside, Seraphina was waiting, her eyes soft but serious. She was dressed in ceremonial attire, elegant and regal, a perfect representation of her position as queen. Her presence filled the room, and Ethan could feel the weight of her authority. "Even in a moment like this, Ethan," she said, her voice calm and steady, "I'm glad you came. I know this isn't easy for you, but this is the beginning of something important." Ethan stepped into the room, his eyes meeting hers. "Didn't come here expecting any of this, but I'm here now. I've made my choice." Seraphina smiled slightly, "and I appreciate that. We'll do this together, not as separate rulers, but as equals." Her eyes softened a little more. "You've seen the cost of war. You understand what is at stake. We can change the future of our people, Ethan." Ethan nodded, feeling the weight of her words. He did understand what was at stake, but he also understood the dangers of such a decision. Marrying Seraphina meant more than just joining two kingdoms. It meant becoming part of a larger story, one with a future that could either bring peace or push the galaxy into further chaos. "I'm not sure what I'm supposed to do now," Ethan admitted. "I don't know what this will look like after the ceremony." "What happens then?" Seraphina stepped closer to him, her eyes never leaving his face. "What happens then is up to both of us. Once we are married, we will be a united force. Together, we will speak for our people. We will show the galaxy that humans and Kadar can work together, that we can stop this war. You will no longer be a diplomat. You will be my partner." Ethan took a deep breath. He had never imagined his life would change so drastically, but here he was, facing a future he had never planned for, a future that involved a queen and a war that needed to end. "I understand," he said quietly, "but I need you to promise me something, Seraphina." She raised an eyebrow, intrigued. "What do you need, Ethan?" "I need you to promise me that this marriage will be real, that it won't just be a political move. I need to know that. We are in this together, for real, not just for appearances." Seraphine's eyes softened. "You have my word, Ethan. This will be real. I may be a queen, but I am also a woman who wants peace just as much as you do. You and I both know that. This is not a simple decision, but together, we will make it work." Ethan's heart calmed slightly at her words. There was sincerity in her voice. He could hear it, see it in her eyes. He had made the right choice, hadn't he? He had to believe that he had. This marriage could bring peace. It could stop the war. But it would take more than just their words. It would take their commitment to each other and to their people. "You really believe this will work?" Ethan asked, his voice filled with doubt. "I do," Seraphina said, stepping even closer to him. "I believe in you, Ethan. I believe in us." For the first time in days, Ethan allowed himself to believe, too. The weight of the decision didn't feel quite so heavy. If they worked together, they could bring about the peace that the galaxy so desperately needed. And maybe, just maybe, he could find his place in this strange new life. He looked into her eyes, his resolve hardening. "Okay, let's do this." Seraphina smiled, and for the first time, Ethan saw not just the queen, but the woman behind the crown, the woman who had fought for her people, who had struggled and sacrificed. And now they would fight together. The days leading up to the wedding ceremony were a whirlwind of activity. Ethan barely had time to process the enormity of what he was about to do. One moment, he was a diplomat trying to mediate peace. The next, he was preparing to marry the queen of an alien empire to stop a galaxy-wide war. His life had completely changed, and he wasn't sure if he was ready for everything that came with it. He spent most of his time in the palace, meeting with Seraphine's advisors and strategizing with her about the future of their people. They had planned for months, but the closer the ceremony got, the more Ethan began to feel the weight of his decision. The Qatar Empire was a place of tradition and power, and their royal ceremonies reflected that. The grand hall where the marriage would take place was beautifully adorned, with banners and golden ornaments lining the walls. Ethan could feel the tension in the air, the anticipation of something important about to happen. But even with all the preparation, a part of him still hesitated. Was this really the right decision? Was he truly helping end the war, or was he becoming a pawn in a larger game? Serafina, on the other hand, seemed calm and collected, though Ethan knew her heart must be heavy with the same uncertainty. They had both agreed to this marriage, but neither of them knew what the future would hold. Would this union bring peace, or would it lead to further conflict? On the day of the ceremony, Ethan stood at the front of the grand hall, dressed in the ceremonial robes provided by Seraphine's people. The room was filled with alien dignitaries, advisors, and warriors, all gathered to witness the historic event. Ethan looked out at the crowd, his nerves growing with every passing second. His role in this galaxy was about to change forever. Serafina entered the hall, her regal presence silencing the room. She wore an elegant gown of shimmering blue and gold, her long dark hair cascading down her back. Her eyes were filled with determination, yet there was a softness in them that Ethan had never seen before. She was both the powerful queen of the Qatar and the woman who had chosen him as her partner. He saw the weight of the world on her shoulders, and for the first time, he understood just how much she had sacrificed for this moment. As she approached him, their eyes met, and Ethan felt a strange sense of calm. The doubts, the fears, the uncertainty, all of it melted away in that moment. They were in this together, whether they liked it or not. The ceremony was about to begin. There was no turning back. The high priest of the Qatar stepped forward, his voice booming in the silent hall. We gather here today to witness the joining of two great forces, the Qatar and the human race. This union will bring peace, unity, and strength to our people. Ethan and Serafina stood side by side, their hands lightly touching as the priest continued. Do you, Serafina of the Qatar, queen of our people, accept this human as your partner, your equal and your husband? Seraphine's voice was steady, her gaze never leaving Ethan. I do. The priest turned to Ethan. And do you, Ethan? Of Earth, diplomat of the human race, accept Serafina as your partner, your queen, and your wife. Ethan took a deep breath. He thought of all the lives that had been lost in the war, of the suffering that had come from centuries of fighting. He thought of the galaxy, of the future, and of his promise to Serafina. He looked into her eyes, feeling the weight of their shared responsibility. I do, he said, his voice clear and strong. The priest raised his hands, and the room filled with a hum of energy. The marriage was sealed not just by words, but by the power of the Qatar and human civilizations coming together. Ethan felt the weight of it, the sense of something immense and important happening around him. As the ceremony ended, the guests applauded, and Ethan and Serafina turned to face the gathered crowd. They were no longer just two people. They were a symbol of unity, a beacon of hope for the future. The Zergons, their enemies, would see this union and know that peace was possible. But as Ethan looked at Serafina, he couldn't shake the feeling that this was just the beginning. The galaxy might be watching them now, but there would be challenges ahead. They would have to prove that their marriage was more than just a political alliance. They would have to show that their people, both the Qatar and humans, were ready to work together for a better future. As the guests began to leave the hall, Ethan and Serafina stood alone for a moment, taking in the significance of what had just happened. Serafina turned to him, a smile playing at the corners of her lips. It's done, she said softly. We've taken the first step. Ethan nodded, his heart heavy but hopeful.
Ow.
The real work begins. Rafina placed a hand on his arm. Together, we can do this. Together, we will bring peace. Ethan looked at her, his mind finally at ease. He had made his choice. It hadn't been easy, and there would be no guarantees. But standing beside Serafina, he knew that they had the strength to change the course of history. The first few weeks after the marriage were filled with new challenges. Ethan had always been a diplomat, skilled at negotiation, but nothing had prepared him for his new role. As the husband of Queen Seraphina, he wasn't just a visitor to the Qatar Empire anymore, he was part of it. Every day was a constant reminder that he had made a decision that would change the galaxy forever. The Qatar people respected him as their queen's husband, but there was still an air of uncertainty. They didn't yet know him, and he didn't yet know them. The Zerjons, their longtime enemies, were still suspicious, and many wondered if the peace Seraphina had promised could really last. Ethan knew he had to prove himself, not just to the Qatar, but to the entire galaxy. The union between him and Seraphina needed to show that peace wasn't just a dream, it was a reality they could all achieve. Seraphina, on the other hand, seemed to take everything in stride. As the ruler of the Qatar Empire, she had dealt with political pressure, military threats, and power struggles for years. For her, the challenge wasn't in managing her people, but in learning to share power with someone who was once a stranger. Their marriage was a partnership, but one that needed time to grow and strengthen. One evening, as they stood on the balcony of the royal palace overlooking the city, Ethan turned to Seraphina, his eyes filled with questions. "How did you do it?" he asked. "How did you build an empire from nothing? How did you keep it together all these years?" Seraphina glanced at him, a faint smile on her lips. "It wasn't easy. I've had to make difficult choices, sacrifices, that no one else would have understood, but I've always known what was at stake. My people, my empire, they rely on me. I couldn't afford to fail." Ethan nodded, understanding the weight of her words. "I never realized how hard it must have been. I've spent most of my life trying to bring peace through words. But you," he paused, glancing out at the distant horizon, "you've had to fight for it." "There's more than one way to fight for peace, Ethan," Seraphina replied, her voice steady. "Sometimes it's through diplomacy. Sometimes it's through strength. But you have to know when to use both." Ethan thought about her words. Long after they left the balcony, his role as Seraphine's husband wasn't just about showing up at meetings or signing treaties. It was about being a partner, sharing the burden of leadership. The Qatar people needed to see him as more than just an outsider. They needed to see him as a symbol of unity. In the days that followed, Ethan found himself spending more time with the Qatar people. He visited their cities, met with their leaders, and even participated in ceremonies that were once foreign to him. Slowly, he began to understand their culture, their customs, and the pride they took in their history. He saw firsthand how much they valued strength and honor, and how deeply they feared the consequences of failure. Yet, despite all the challenges, Ethan also saw the kindness and loyalty that ran through the heart of the Qatar people. They weren't just warriors. They were a proud, noble civilization, and they had suffered greatly from the long years of war. If they were to have peace, it would take more than just words, it would take trust, and that trust had to be earned. One afternoon, as Ethan and Seraphina walked through the palace gardens, they were approached by one of Seraphine's closest advisors, a tall Qatar warrior named Arden. His face was serious, his eyes scanning the surroundings. "Your Majesty's," Arden began, bowing low. "The Zergons have sent a message. They wish to meet." Ethan and Seraphina exchanged a look. The Zergons had always been their greatest threat, and after the marriage, their intentions were still unclear. Some had seen the union as a sign of weakness, while others were curious about the new alliance. A meeting with the Zerjons could go either way, peace or further conflict. "Do they seek peace?" Ethan asked, his voice steady. Arden nodded. "They say they do, but I do not trust them." Seraphina sighed, her expression hardening. "Neither do I, but we cannot ignore them. This is the opportunity we've been waiting for." Ethan's heart raced. The Zerjons were a powerful and dangerous species. Their military was vast, and their tactics were ruthless. But Seraphina was right. If they were serious about peace, this was the moment to prove it. "We'll meet with them," Ethan said, his voice firm. "But we will do so on our terms. We will not be intimidated." Seraphina smiled at him, her eyes filled with respect. "You are learning, Ethan." The next day, they met with the Zerjon delegation in a neutral meeting hall. The room was large and cold, with only a few simple chairs set in the center. The Zergon leader, Korak, stood at the far end, his sharp features and imposing presence sending a chill through the air. His people were known for their cold, calculating nature, and Ethan knew that they would try to use this meeting to gain an advantage. "We come in peace," Korak said, his voice low and menacing. "But the question remains, can we trust you?" "Cater?" Serafina stepped forward, her posture commanding. "The question, Korak, is whether you can trust yourself. Your people have been at war for far too long. We do not seek to dominate you. We seek an end to the fighting." Korak sneered. "We'll see if your words hold true, but I'm not convinced that this human will be enough to change anything." Ethan stepped forward, his voice calm. "It's not just about what I can do, Korak. It's about what we can do together." For the first time, Korak's expression shifted, a flicker of doubt crossing his face. Ethan knew that the Zergons had always viewed humans as insignificant, weak. But now, they were beginning to see that the galaxy was changing, and they would either change with it or be left behind. As the meeting continued, the tension in the room slowly began to ease. While Korak was still wary, there was a glimmer of hope. The Zergons were listening. And that, Ethan realized, was the first step toward peace.